Welcome to This Explainer. Let's dive right into a fascinating psychological mystery today. And we're going to start with a story of a ruined symphony. Imagine, listening raptly to this long, beautiful symphony on a record. The music is absolutely glorious. It's a true masterpiece. But right near the end, there's a terrible scratch on the disc, and it produces this shocking, awful sound. You might say, as a man once did to the renowned psychologist Daniel Kahneman, that the bad ending ruined the whole experience. But here is where Kahneman's central puzzle gets really fascinating. Think about it. The listener felt the bad ending ruined the experience, right? But physically, those 40 minutes of previous musical pleasure, they still happened. The listener sat there and experienced immense joy for a full 40 minutes. The experience wasn't actually ruined, only the memory of it was. And honestly, that crucial distinction is the key to unlocking a massive, kind of mind-blowing flaw in how our brains work. Which brings us to section 1. The meaning of utility, pain versus preference. So, to figure out why we make this mistake with the symphony, we've got to look at how experts historically measure our choices and feelings. Contrast Jeremy Bentham's old-school focus on in-the-moment pain and pleasure, which he called experienced utility, with how modern economists look at things. Economists view utility as wantability. We call that decision utility. See, they build their models on the assumption that humans are totally rational agents, making decisions that maximize our own best interests. The logic seems super simple, right? We should naturally want what we will actually enjoy. But do we really?
Let's test that in Section 2, the colonoscopy puzzle, a clinical mystery.
To put this assumption of human rationality to the ultimate test, we're going to look at a real medical mystery from the early 1990s. This perfectly illustrates the data from a landmark study by Kahneman and Dr. Don Riddlemere. Notice how patient A has a relatively short procedure. It lasts under 10 minutes, but look at the end. It finishes abruptly on a very high pain spike. Now look over at patient B. Patient B suffers for much longer, over 20 minutes actually, but the pain gradually tapers off, ending at a significantly lower pain level. Now, looking at the total time spent in pain, ask yourself, who actually endured more overall suffering? Like if we had a literal meter measuring total pain over time, whose meter would be higher? Patient B clearly spent far more time in pain. They suffered more in the moment, for sure. But here is the jaw-dropping twist. When asked afterward, patient A remembered the experience as far worse, rating it a 7.5 compared to patient B's 4.5. Patient A had a shorter procedure and objectively less total pain, yet their memory recorded it as a much, much greater nightmare. Crazy, right? Let's unpack that in Section 3, the rules of memory. Why we keep score incorrectly. So why in the world did the patient who suffered less actually remember it as being so much worse? Well, it all comes down to something called the peak-end rule. See, our minds don't add up total pain like a mathematical equation. Instead, our fast, intuitive brain, what Kahneman calls System 1, represents whole sets of moments using prototypes. It heavily weeds the absolute worst moment of the experience, the peak, and the final moments. For patient A, the peak and the end were both terrible at the exact same time, so their overall memory rating just skyrocketed. But wait, what about the fact that patient B suffered for twice as long? Astonishingly, we completely ignore the length of the experience due to a quirk called duration neglect. This literally means 20 minutes of pain could be remembered as exactly equal to 8 minutes of pain as long as the peaks match. We are almost entirely blind to time when forming our retrospective memories. Moving on to Section 4, the cold hand experiment, choosing more pain. To prove just how dangerous these memory rules are to our daily decision-making, Kahneman designed what I like to call a mild torture experiment. In Step 1, participants plunged their hand into painfully cold 14-degree water for 60 seconds, and then they got a warm towel. Simple enough. But in Step 2, they do the exact same 60 seconds in that freezing 14-degree water. But instead of stopping, the experimenter secretly lets in slightly warmer water for an additional 30 seconds. It's still painful, but just a tiny bit less painful than that freezing peak. I really want to emphasize this point. The long episode contains all the exact same pain as the short one, plus an extra 30 seconds of totally needless suffering. The results of this are absolutely astonishing. An incredible 80% of participants voluntarily chose to repeat the longer, 90-second, more painful trial. Why on earth would they do that? Because that slightly warmer end tricked their memory. The peak end average of the long trial was actually lower than the short trial, so they remembered it as better. They voluntarily signed up for more actual pain. This leads us perfectly into Section 5, two different selves, the internal conflict. What this cold hand experiment reveals is a profound conflict of interest happening right inside our own minds. There is a stark contrast between the experiencing self, the part of you that actually lives in the present moment and practically begs for the shorter cold water trial, and the remembering self. The remembering self is the one that archives the event and makes all our future choices based on those faulty archives. Kahneman has a brilliant quote that perfectly captures this. He says, "What we learn from the past is to maximize the qualities of our future memories, not necessarily of our future experience. This is the tyranny of the remembering self." Think about that. We willingly choose more actual physical pain just to secure a slightly less aversive memory for our mental scrapbook. The remembering self acts like a total tyrant, completely ignoring our actual moment-to-moment physical well-being. And finally, Section 6, the illusion of rationality, a fundamental flaw. Okay, let's tie all of this back to our fundamental understanding of human behavior and economics. Normally, we have strong preferences for long pleasures and short pains. That's just common sense, right? Yet, our memory is evolutionarily hardwired to ignore duration completely. Because our brain represents experiences with these snapshot prototypes instead of adding up the total sum, an inconsistency is quite literally built into the design of our minds. It practically guarantees we're going to make erroneous decisions that do not maximize our actual happiness. So, I want to end this explainer with a profound challenge to that classic rational agent model we talked about earlier. If our own memories actively trick us into choosing unnecessary pain, can we really call ourselves rational? Think about that the next time you reflect on a past vacation, a bad meal, or even a medical procedure. Are you making choices based on what will actually make you happy, or are you just a victim of the tyranny of your remembering self? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the hidden forces driving your choices.